Africa Summit. This is a very important summit just before the second US-Africa Summit. And I wish the summit successful and in garnering international attention and support for Africa. So back to your first question. Africa is a young, promising land. And China-African friendship is deep-seated and has a long history. And it's very popular in China. If you ask a foreign minister of China, whoever he is or she is, he or she must tell you that Africa is important. China-African relations are the bedrock of China foreign policy. I'll give you an example. Every foreign minister since 20 years ago must visit African countries, at the beginning of every year. So the visit to Africa is the first outgoing visit of Chinese foreign minister. So that can tell us how important we attach.
And I know that there was a reshuffling of leadership in China. You were made a member of the Central Committee. A man named Wang Yi, if I'm saying it correctly, is the director of the CCP Central Foreign Affairs Committee and is well respected in Africa. So the Africa dimensions that just went up a notch in the recent promotions after the recent party congress. Is that something that you, as you look at the other global stakeholders, the United States, are you putting higher priority on Africa from your perspective than, say, the United States or other nations?
Well, our relationship with Africa is sincere. It's out of the consideration to help Africa in its efforts for peace, security, and development.
Right.
We are not interested in the views of any other countries on China's role in Africa. And we believe that Africa should be a place for international cooperation, not for major powers competition for geopolitical gains. And we welcome all other members of international community, including the United States, to join us in the global efforts to help Africa. I hope that the forthcoming Africa-US Summit will come out with more concrete and workable measures.
Well, one of the concerns that some have had regarding China's approach to Africa is the so-called Chinese debt trap or debt trap diplomacy, that China will come in and become the financing backbone of large infrastructure projects, take collateral of those infrastructure projects, they won't work well, and that China will use this to secure greater geopolitical influence. What are your thoughts? I mean, I assume that you may have a different view, but what are your views on the Chinese debt trap question?
Well, China's investment and the financing assistance to Africa is not a trap. No. It's a benefit. Over the past decades, China provided loans to help Africa's economic and social developments. The construction works are everywhere. in Africa. You can see hospitals, highways, airports, stadiums. Obvious. There's no such a trap. It's not a plot. It's transparent. It's sincere. It's obvious. I give you a figure in terms of debts. China is not the biggest creditor of African debts. According to World Bank, 49 African countries, as far as the data can be obtained, 49 African countries owes about $700 million debts. Among them, 2/3 are owed to multinational institutions and non-Chinese private lenders. And China's, the debts owned by China only a small amount. And according to Debt Justice, a UK charity, the African countries, owns 3 times more debts than they owed to China. And the interest rate were doubled, So China is not the largest creditor, and also China understands the debt situation. China wants to help African countries to get out of the poverty and to work for economic and social development. And there's a concern about debt issues during the pandemic. We've seen the G20. There's a arrangement which is called the G20 Debt Service Suspension Initiative. China is an active member, and China participates in this initiative, and China suspended the most service payment among G20 members.
Right.
And China will continue to participate beyond this initiative, and we will participate.
Right.
We are participating, and we will participate in the debt treatment for individual countries. And also we call on all other creditors, multinational institutions and private lenders, all take active actions to reduce the debt burden of African countries in the principle of share burden, fair burden sharing, and common actions.
Oh, thank you. At a room, I want to get to climate change real quick, but I want to tell a little, fun vignette that you offered at a Panda ceremony. It was the 50th anniversary of the Panda program, Panda exchange between the United States and China. And you made the comment, which I found fun, that said the pandas are no longer near extinction, that they've now reached a certain level of being able to populate the world, that they're now not off that endangered species, but you said those that are endangered are panda huggers, and meaning those that appreciate China. And I want to ask this with regards to U.S.-China tensions and big questions like climate change. Did the Biden-Xi summit in Bali set a floor on U.S.-China relations, and are they moving up? And is the climate meeting that we just had in Sharm el-Sheikh, where the Chinese negotiator Xi Jinping recently said that talks with John Kerry were candid, friendly, positive, and active. Overall, it's been very positive. It sounds very different, in fact, than the tone we had, say, just a month ago. Have U.S.-China relations, in terms of dealing with global problems, changed?
Okay. First of all, about panda. I know African people like pandas also. And I believe that in Africa, you can see most panda huggers. I don't know if we have pandas in Africa. Maybe in the future we can
Would you be willing
provide
to offer
pandas.
them? Would you be willing to offer them?
Well,
We could do a deal here.
let's think about it. All right. And about China-U.S. relations, yes, it's been going downhill over the past few years. This is because that with the fast development of China, there are misunderstandings and misperceptions of China in the United States, which has resulted in a policy that is very harsh, very unfriendly about China. Last month, President Xi and President Biden had a successful meeting in Bali. That's during the G20 summit. The two presidents had a very in-depth and a candid exchange of views and opinions on bilateral relations and on the pressing global and regional issues. And they made very important common understandings. That is, both sides need to do something to calm down the tension and to step up communications and the dialogue to expand cooperation. They have identified some priority areas for interactions, including climate, including public health, agriculture, food security, macroeconomic policy coordination. So the meeting was effective to relax the tension and give people a sigh of relief. And there are lots of things to follow up, and we hope that both sides can act on the serious commitments by the two presidents. It's a whole process matter, not only good, nice words and serious promises during the meeting, and we are paying more attention to these, what will come out, how United States will treat China, and what United States will do on China in the future.
So on the climate front, were you disappointed? Sounds like it was a very good meeting, U.S.-China meeting there, but were you disappointed that more was not achieved to help developing nations in the costs of responding to climate change and dealing with climate change?
Well, I think the international community is needed to have more attention and input to tackle the climate, because it is a global challenge. And as far as China is concerned, we not only talk, but also we walk the talk, we walk the walk. And at home, we have announced two goals. That is to achieve carbon peak before the year 2030.
Right.
And to achieve carbon neutrality before 2060. So These goals are our serious commitments, so we will honor it. We have already published the roadmaps and the work action plans to realize these two goals. And internationally, we participated actively in helping the developing world, particularly African countries, to combat the climate. For example, China initiated the global cooperation partnership on clean energy. The first batch of projects will go to 19 African countries. Now, China is helping African countries to develop clean energy, wind and solar ones, and we are building low carbon demonstration zones in some African countries. So China will not shirk its responsibility, but we also call on the developed countries, including the United States, to honor its commitments. For example, developed countries has pledged to provide $100 billion as a green finance to every year to developing countries. But many years have passed. This pledge hasn't been honored. And the United States has announced during COP26 that to provide $3 billion every year to the most fragile, vulnerable countries. Most of them are sub-Sahara countries. And we hope that the United States will also act on its words to provide effective and concrete assistance, technology, and expertise, capability building to African countries.
We're right near the end of our time, and I want to ask you, while we have a chance, that as you in your role here in Washington, manage relationship between China and the United States, do you see areas that we're not developing? I know we're competing. I know that the president has says we're not necessarily on a collision course. I don't know how you see it. Maybe we are on a collision course. But are there areas that we're not developing where China and the United States, perhaps with regards to Africa or other parts of the world, should be cooperating?
Good question. China and the United States are both major countries and permanent members of permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations. So both countries share common responsibilities for not only the benefits of the people, but also the future of the world. So there are lots of areas, projects, China and the United States can work on together. And people want to see China and the United States to do so. That's the international expectation. And we need to bear in mind our important responsibilities and be mindful of the international aspiration to expand cooperation and the dialogue on a vast range of issues, not only everyday exchange of harsh words, exchange of attacks, smearings on China, so on and so forth. We need to expand the broad our vision and expand our cooperation. I think Africa is one of the very interesting areas for two countries to work on. in recent years, we have good examples. For example, in 2015, China and United States together help African countries like Liberia to fight against Ebola. It's a good example. And there's still several good economic projects jointly in Africa, jointly participated by China, United States, and African countries. Like there's a textile industry park in Ethiopia. That is jointly sponsored, built, and operated by China, United States, and the Ethiopian governments. It's very productive and export garments to Europe and North America markets. So that's very successful. So we hope that we can work with the United States on the peace, security, and prosperity in Africa.
So Ambassador, as you can see, I probably have about 2 hours worth of questions here that we could go to. But just finally, we have a lot of folks online. We have a lot of folks from Africa here, from the United States. It looks like China's opening up perhaps a little bit, relaxing COVID a little bit. So 2 questions is, can we all visit Beijing and Shanghai soon? Mm-hmm. And 2, did the protests make a difference? Did the government feel the stress and tension of the protests with regards to COVID?
Well, I think that the government is taking a very responsible attitude to protect people's lives, facing the threat of COVID. And our response policy and its measures, have always been dynamic, not rigid, just lockdown, asking people to confine to their homes. That's not true. And we know people's concerns. We know the importance of, the coordination of COVID response and economic growth. So that's why we are making dynamic readjustment to our response measures. Now the measures are being relaxed, and in the near future, I believe that the measures will be further relaxed, and international travel will become easier.
From Africa and the United States?
Well, from all the directions, right, to China.
Yeah, I just want to make sure I get you all tickets, so, or at least visas. Anyway, Ambassador Qin Gang, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Ambassador.
Thank you.